I'm honestly blown away at everything that God has revealed. I'm so excited right now to share with you what He's revealing today. And I really honestly thought that this was impossible. I've looked at every context in Scripture for harvest, gather, seasons, months, Pentecost, Passover, unleavened bread, Day of Atonement. I've looked at every single context so that I can understand, all right, were there any contexts where, for example, one of these date specific holy days was being observed in a different kind of season? And there was. I talked about that in a different video. I talked about the Day of Atonement was being observed in winter because Paul was saying that he was looking for a place to winter in that he was going to winter in Greece, but the harbor was unsuitable for wintering, and the Day of Atonement had just passed. If the Day of Atonement was in the same season every single year, then and in the seasons in which the world or Reformed Judaism is claiming, then that would have been in autumn. It would not have been in winter. And it would have been in early autumn, late summer in Israel. So this is very interesting that, he has shown me every single thing. And in this particular situation, I would not have known to look this particular thing up. But I will tell you that everything that I've been searching, I've been seeking Him, and I just sat down right now because I was feeling like, okay, I feel like based on this, and this, that the Festival of Weeks and is supposed to occur after the full moon. I just have kept feeling that. And the body and I have prayed and discerned certain dates that the Lord directed us to with regard to Pentecost. And both of them occurred after the day after the full moon, the day after that 15th 7-day Sabbath. May 7th for the year 2023 and May 18th for the year 2022. But I just have not known how in the world is He going to bring me to understand this or be able to narrow down when this actually occurred. Well, He's made a way, all right. Let's take a look. In Leviticus 23, verse 4, He says, "These are the Lord's appointed festivals, the sacred assemblies. You are to proclaim at their appointed times. The Lord's Passover begins at twilight on the 14th day of the month. And on the 15th day of the month, the Lord's festival of unleavened bread begins. For 7 days you must eat bread made without yeast. On the first day hold a sacred assembly, do no regular work. For 7 days present a food offering to the Lord. And on the 7th day hold a sacred assembly and do no regular work." This context kind of makes it sound like the Festival of Unleavened Bread and the Passover are two separate things. But in Luke chapter 22, it says, "Then came the day of unleavened bread on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed." So it's actually using the Festival of Unleavened Bread and the Passover interchangeably. Oh, I'm sorry, that was verse 7. I was like, wait a minute, I don't remember that being verse 1. Okay, so sorry, I needed to scroll up. The first verse says, "Now the festival of unleavened bread called the Passover was approaching." So they're used interchangeably. This is what the word is telling us, that it's used interchangeably. So there's the Passover on which the lamb is going to be sacrificed, the first day, but then there's the 7 days of the festival of unleavened bread, which are also called the Passover. I know that's a little confusing. It just is what it is. Going back to Leviticus 23, in verse 9, the Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I'm going to give you, and you reap its harvest, bring to the priest a sheaf of the first grain you harvest. He is to wave the sheaf before the Lord so it will be accepted on your behalf. The priest is to wave it on the day after the Sabbath. On the day you wave the sheaf, you must sacrifice," okay, then he goes into the sacrifices, "a burnt offering to the Lord, a lamb, a year old without defect, together with its grain offering of 2/10 of an ephah of the finest flour, mixed with olive oil, a food offering presented to the Lord, a pleasing aroma, and its drink offering of 1/4 of a hin of wine. You must not eat any bread." Listen to this command. "You must not eat any bread or roasted or new grain until the very day you bring this offering to your God. This is to be a lasting ordinance for the generations to come wherever you live." And in the next paragraph, you have the Festival of Weeks being set in reference to the offering of first fruits. But right now, just for a moment, we're going to take a look at the offering of first fruits so that we can know irrefutably when this occurred. Now, it's not going to occur at the same time, or it is going to occur at the same time, but it's not going to occur in reference to the Passover in this particular way every time, because on God's calendar, a 360-day year, God days, by the way, which equates to a 354-day year in terms of how the world is defining days. And on that type of a calendar, you're going to have date-specific holy days ending up in different seasons. But in this particular year, when God brought them into that land, and 40 years prior when he did the Exodus, and also years later when Jesus came, he made sure that these seasons aligned with, in this same way, with those date-specific holy days. Now, the other thing is that as he's been restoring this calendar, in 2022, he did the same thing. That is incredible. In 2022, he anointed his witnesses who would restore his calendar, and this is exactly what he did. Yet again, made sure that it aligned perfectly with the way that he established it during the first Exodus, 40 years later when he brought them into the promised land, and when Jesus came. That's amazing. That's incredible. Okay, so we know when God brought them into the promised land, he brought them in not through Moses. Remember that he did not let Moses bring them into the promised land. Moses died before because of that incident with the rock and how Moses was taking credit for bringing water out of the rock and wasn't giving glory to God. So he wasn't able to, he was told, you're not going to finish this out. You're not going to lead the people into the promised land. So that was given to Joshua. So look at this. Joshua 5 verse 10. On the evening of the 14th day of the month, while camped at Gilgal on the plains of Jericho, the Israelites celebrated the Passover. The day after the Passover, that very day, okay, now they have already been brought into the land, right? 40 years to the day brought into the land. They're camping at Gilgal on the plains of Jericho. They're celebrating the Passover, and it says the day after the Passover. Okay, what is the day after the Passover? Because you have to understand this part or you're not going to get it. The day after the Passover, they ate some of the produce of the land. They would not have been harvesting the day after the Passover, the 14th, because that was a Sabbath. There are two reasons I know this. First of all, they would not have been harvesting on the Sabbath. And second of all, because the word says in Leviticus 23 that they were to bring that the day after the Sabbath. So there's no way that the word can be referencing that they did this the day after the 14th on the first day of the Festival of Unleavened Bread. What it's saying is that the Israelites celebrated the Passover on the 14th day of the month, and then they continued to celebrate the Passover, which is the Festival of Unleavened Bread. And after the Passover, after that whole festival, that's when they brought the sheaf of the wave offering. That was the sheaf wave day. The offering of first fruits was the day after that last day of assembly of the Passover, of the Festival of Unleavened Bread, which is the Passover. Okay, let me break it down again because I know it might be confusing for some people, especially if you're just learning about this. Leviticus 23 says, you slaughter the lamb at twilight on the 14th day of the month. On the 15th day of the month, you begin the Festival of Unleavened Bread. For 7 days, you eat bread made without yeast. On the first day, it's a Sabbath, and the last day, it's a Sabbath. All of this, the Passover and the Festival of Unleavened Bread, are referred to the Passover as in Luke 22, verse 1. When the word says, as it does here in Joshua 5, verse 11, the day after the Passover, they ate some of the produce of the land, what it's saying is that they have offered that first fruits. They've brought the sheaf of the wave offering to the priest to wave it on their behalf, to be accepted on their behalf, and it had to have occurred the day after Sabbath. Well, the last day of the Passover, of the Festival of Unleavened Bread, is a Sabbath. It is the 22nd of the month. The 22nd of the month is always a Sabbath. Now, if the 22nd of the month is always the Sabbath before the festival of unleavened bread, making the festival of unleavened bread the 23rd on God's month, that means that when you are harvesting for the festival of weeks, 50 days later is always going to be on the 16th of the month, of God's month. It is always going to be the day after the 15th of God's month, which is a Sabbath. So wheat is harvested every year around May, pretty consistently across the world. Barley is harvested in late March, early April, consistently throughout the world. All you have to do is look up the 15th on God's calendar, correlating in May, the 15th in May, not on the Gregorian calendar, but God's calendar, the 15th of the month, in the month of May, and count backwards, and you're going to see that it will always be on the 22nd on God's calendar towards the end of March, early April. And that's going to give you the offering of first fruits, and it's going to give you Pentecost. I'm absolutely blown away that he made this so clear. The two dates that the body discerned were May 7th, 2024, 2023, and May 18th, 2022, before we even knew any of this. He gave us that confirmation. We prayed about it for 3 weeks, and here's the proof in the Word. Absolutely incredible. Please discern this with God. Ask me any questions you have. Thank you for listening.